Hi, welcome to another episode of Swim for Land. Now, this is quite a special episode. It discusses suicide. Now, that is something that I felt that I had to cover in this podcast because it is one aspect of mental health that I don't know how to broach the subject. And last week, I heard on the John Beattie show on BBC Radio Scotland an incredible woman called Sarah Frame, who was talking about how she lost her son a year and a half ago to suicide. And the way she was talking about it and the dignity she had and the strength that she had and the honesty blew me away, and I knew that I wanted to talk to her. I'm also joined by Liam Doyle, who is a Glasgow singer-songwriter and busker. And I find out how they've got an alliance together and how a chance meeting on a Glasgow street has resulted in something positive. They're going to tell us about that in this podcast. First of all, I'd like to thank my sponsors, RHA Audio, who are a Glasgow-based company who make my favourite headphones, and they have been such a great support in the making of this podcast. So I'm gonna just hand over now for you to listen to this story. This podcast discusses suicide. So I'm just going to say that up front in case it's something that you're uncomfortable with, but I feel we need to cover it. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Sarah Frame and Liam Doyle. Sarah, thank you very much for joining me today. How are you?
Yeah, it's a privilege to be on this. I've listened to some of your other podcasts, so I know I'm not going to be as funny as some people or as knowledgeable as Alistair Cook, but I'm very glad of the opportunity to share experiences.
Well, see, that's why I got Alistair on, because I don't know, I needed to ask somebody that had, answers to questions that I wanted to ask. And that's one of the reasons why I've asked you to come on, Sarah, because throughout all the episodes I've done of this, I've not wanted to talk about suicide, but because I don't think anybody wants to talk about that. But I've struggled with how to broach the subject with anybody I've been speaking to, because it's a brave and a scary thing to talk about. And then when I heard you on John Beattie's show, I just thought, there's the perfect person, because you're already doing what I'm terrified to ask somebody to do, which I think is incredible, that you're willing to be able to talk about this stuff. Now, just to give a little bit of background to people that might not know your story, Sarah, you lost your son Gordon 2 years ago to suicide.
A year and a half ago.
And you've I don't know how you're doing this. I don't know how you're able to talk about this, because I can't get it into my head how it must feel. First of all, do you want to tell me a little bit of the story of what happened?
Yeah. Yes, Gordon was my younger son, my middle child of my 5 children. And, like all my children, I absolutely adored him. Love him deeply, and there are no words to explain the loss of a child, of how that feels. And what I try and do is to cope as best as I can, to try and find ways of managing the grief. And one of the things that does help me is that I think we do have to talk more about suicide, because suicide, as you know, Tom, it's the biggest killer, particularly of young men under 50. More die from suicide than from any other disease. So I think the more we can do to remove the stigma, the more that we can do to encourage people to get help, and not to get to the point where they can't see any other way out but to end their life, to escape from the pain that they're feeling. I want to do that, and it helps me to feel that by talking, if there's an opportunity that it will cause even just one person to pause and think, to have one person reach out for help to, whether it's the Samaritans or another agency or a friend or whoever, because there are a lot of people get close to the point of taking their lives, but actually do find a way to get help and get past it and go on and live fulfilled and meaningful lives. So if I can help, if I can stop even one other mother coping with the pain that I cope with, then that feels to me like a positive thing to have done.
God, Sarah. You said something there that that really struck me. You said about suicide being a bigger killer than any other disease, because that's almost the way I see suicide, as a disease rather than a decision. It's almost as if there's no choice.
Yeah, and I mean, tell you a little bit about Gordon first. He was my much loved son. He was 35 when he died. He was a sergeant in the Royal Scots Dragoon Guards. He'd had a fantastic career in the army. He fulfilled his childhood dream of being a soldier. He used to stand I'd take them to Edinburgh Castle on a day out, and he would stand and look at the soldiers and say he was going to be one of them one day. And actually, one of the things he did in the last year of his career was he led the Queen's Guard at Edinburgh Castle one day, which was a fantastic privilege. And really, was that wee boy that had stood and looked at the soldiers there. So he had a really good career there. He had won many boxing championships in the army. He coached young soldiers to become prize-winning boxers. He got a very rare colonel's commendation for the work that he did in creating a boxing team for his regiment and coaching them to success. He did clubs for underprivileged kids. He was funny. He was a real joker. And that's something you quite often hear after somebody's died. In those circumstances, you often hear people saying, but he was the life and soul. He was the last person I'd have thought of. Oh, she was always full of life. You hear that so often. But so often I think that's because they portray that outside, that's the external view, but it's not what's going on inside. And I really want people to be able to share with somebody, whoever that is, what goes on inside. So Gordon, he was really funny. He was a real joker. He could be really annoying because of it sometimes. And he was very loving. He adored his children. He was a really good father. Cycling, walking, beach, climbing, playing, football, boxing, did all these things with his kids. And my children, were the 5 siblings are very close as well. So, it's been really, really hard for all of us. And we do want, I think, as a family, to do what we can, because the children, my elder children's father also took his own life 30 years ago. And as my elder son said after we lost Gordon, we have to break this cycle. And that's a scary thing, because when somebody has been affected by suicide already, they are very much more likely to also take their own life. And that's almost doesn't make sense, but that's what research shows. Whether it's because it then becomes something that has almost been normalised because you've had exposure to it, I don't know. I don't know the answers to that. But we all miss him very, very much.
It just seems to me that when I mean, I was speaking to one of your other sons the other night about this, and he showed me the video of the song that you've done, which we'll get to in a minute. But from all the photographs I saw of Gordon, it's almost as if it was the last person you would pick out of a lineup to say that is somebody who is having suicidal thoughts. And you're right, it's a mask thing, and it's a no, I'm fine, I'm fine. But I think it just shows that this can affect anyone. It's not just somebody who.
I think we knew Gordon was struggling. He struggled on and off. He had difficult teenage years, but as he turned it all around with the army. And And he had certainly been struggling with depression for about a year. But we thought he was getting better. His doctor thought he was getting better and signed him off to go back to work. I thought he was getting better. He thought he was getting better. His wife thought he was getting better. So, and that really, I find that really hard, because there've been times where, I spoke to him, almost every day, and some days he would feel that he was on top of things. He'd be like, I've got this, Mum, and, I'm back in my exercise and I'm doing this, and and he would plan, and he would believe he was on top of it and he was okay now. And other days he would struggle. And one message I've got from him where he said, I despair and panic, I lose sight of things, and all that cycles around, and I can't see a way through it. So, and I think that expresses maybe what people feel like. So, and I was really, I say, it came as obviously it came as a terrible shock, but partly as well because I'd thought, he is getting better. But there was a number of factors all, I think, came together at the same time, which I just think he at that time couldn't see a way out, although there would have been. And that's, I spoke to somebody in the Samaritans actually about that. I thought he'd been getting better, and they said quite often what happens when somebody's had really bad depression and they start to get better, they look up, it's like they've fallen down a big well and they're climbing up, and they look up and the top just seems too far away, and they look down and that's a long way, and they let go because it just seems too hard. But because of, Gordon, I have messages from Gordon saying, don't worry, Mum, I would never take my own life. I want to see my children grow up. I want to see my grandkids. And he meant that. But it was an illness, and I believe that Gordon died of an illness as much as if he died from cancer or anything else.
That's the way I think that the way that society is slowly changing in all aspects of the way they look at mental health. But this is the kind of final, it's almost like this is the kind of final taboo subject to talk about, because it's frightening. I mean, I've kind of spoken a couple of times about experiences where I've had suicidal thoughts, some of which have been fleeting, like almost like an electronic impulse in my brain, and some have been very sinister that have lasted maybe a few days, and I've started planning stuff, and it's all based in overwhelm. It's like what you're talking about the top of the well looking too looking too far away. It's about things being too overwhelming and too massive to deal with, and it's like the choice getting taken away, and I'm so lucky that something made me get help and phone at the right time or whatever. But I don't have the experience of ever attempting suicide, but I've been down the path, and for me to talk about that is frightens the shite out of me, because I had thought, and look what you'd said, I'd thought I'd got on top of it. A few years ago, I thought it was gone, and then last summer I got ill again with anxiety and depression, and that all started creeping back again. And of course, isolation and lockdown didn't help. But I get what you mean about the choice being taken away, so it's almost like reality becomes distorted, and you start thinking that the world will be a better place without you in it.
Yeah. So depression causes your mind to not work properly. Your brain is an organ in your body. Gordon's doctor said this to me. The brain is an organ in the body like any other organ, and it can go wrong. So when you've got depression, or even just, as you said, overwhelmed by despair, for a lot of people, they're just overwhelmed by debt, relationship problems, addiction problems, so many things that just seem, I can't get out of this. And then your mind will tell you lies. It will say, everybody, you know what, everybody would be better off without you. You're nothing but a burden. What good are you anyway? What good are you doing? And there's no way out. And those are lies. And so if that's what your mind's telling you, you know, you need to get help urgently. And there's a book I read which I found very helpful. In fact, I got a copy for the rest of my family as well, called Dying to Be Free. And it says in that people who commit suicide did not want to die. They just wanted unconsciousness. They just wanted escape from the pain they were in. And often people have tried lots of other ways to overcome their pain. And generally the things that we turn to as an escape from pain tend to make it worse. We turn to alcohol or drugs or unsafe behaviours or comfort eating, whatever it is. We'll try these things. We'll try lots of different ways to make ourselves feel better. And when those don't work, or and often they make things worse, then people feel there's no way, they can't see any other way out but to end it. And I think we have to talk about it more. I think it's hopeful hearing you say that you have had thoughts, but you didn't do it. And that can give people hope, Tom, that they can get that far and get through it.
That's why I used the word lucky when I was talking about my own thing, because it does, looking back on it, feel like, oh my God, that was so close and it was so real that it is almost like the choice gets taken away. It's like, whether do I jump out of the burning room and fall 5 stories, or do I stay in here and burn it? It's like, and then the thing that you talk about, you know, about Gordon wanting to see his kids grow up, that all, I mean, all the stuff I thought about my pals having to, or my family having to deal with it, that all just went out. It wasn't part of the reality that I was spinning in. And it just, I mean, my thing was, I phoned my doctor. Rather than phoning the Samaritans of them, because that's something that I've discovered recently and that I want to ask you about next. I've always thought of the Samaritans as somebody that you phone when you're on the bridge or when you're about to do the thing. I didn't realise that actually it's a pal on the end of the phone when you need to talk. And you've been quite an advocate of the Samaritans. What is the Samaritans for? So, what is it there for, and what do they do when you phone?
I actually thought the same as you, Tom. I thought that, and I think probably a lot of us have that perception that, you know, and that you shouldn't take up their time unnecessarily unless you are standing on the verge. But actually, you know, it's like any other illness. The sooner you get help, you know, the better it is for everybody. And the Samaritans would rather people phoned early. And basically, if you phone the Samaritans, because sometimes you need to talk, but you don't want to talk to your family or your friend, partly because as a family or friend member, it's very difficult not to just give people advice and say, how many times do people say, well, if I was you, I would, and you think, well, you're not me. Or, you know, they say this is what they think you should do. Well, that's not helpful. What is helpful is somebody just to listen to where you're at, not to judge you, not to be emotionally impacted as your family are if you're telling them what you feel. Of course, you know, of course you might not want to tell people close to you what's really, really going on inside you, but you can phone the Samaritans and you can tell them anything, and you can tell them the things that you would be embarrassed or ashamed or guilty feeling to tell anybody else, and they're not going to judge you, and they're not going to give you advice in terms of telling you what to do, but they will just listen, and you can talk it out, and they'll, you know, help you sort of find your own ways out of things, and they're just always there. I think they do an amazing job. So you're not taking up somebody's space that might, because that is another thought that entered my head, is like, well, what if somebody's in trouble and they can't get through because I'm talking about debt? Or no, you matter. You matter as an individual, and if you need help, you phone. You take, you know, that's your responsibility to kind of get the help you need when you need it. And I mean, I got involved with the Samaritans because Gordon he'd lost a very close colleague to suicide only a few weeks before he died himself, and he'd been hugely impacted by it, and he signed up to do the Samarathon. And he said, I'm 35 and I've attended 3 funerals of people suicide, and that included his own father. So when he died, friends, family, his army friends and colleagues, everybody kind of decided they would try and do it for him, and we raised nearly £20,000 for the Samaritans. And we've carried on and doing things with them, and I've used it. It's been helpful for me. So I'd decided this year that I would do the Samarathon, not in one day, obviously not the marathon, but I decided I would do it over 12 days, and I'd never run, and my family didn't think I could do it, and I started running so that I could raise money for the Samaritans, and I've kept running. So for my mental health, that's a good thing that I now do. So it helps me manage my own grief and channel it. So I've been in quite close contact with the Samaritans over the song Just Reach Out that I know we're going to talk about. And I've learnt so much from them.
So we've got the Samaritans number up there. Phone it, don't put it off, please. So Sarah, something extraordinary happened. Can you tell me about this?
Yeah. So about 6 months after Gordon died, so almost this time last year, I started bereavement counselling. I was very fortunate to get bereavement counselling from an agency that specialises in counselling for people that have been bereaved through suicide or murder. And I hadn't tried for about 6 months because I just thought, what's the point in going for counselling? It can't bring Gordon back. It can't change anything. There's just no point. But actually, I'm really glad I did, because it helped me find ways of helping myself to cope. Anyway, I'd gone to the first session, and you can imagine it was freezing cold. It was like it is just now. And I'd gone, it was I came out about 5 o'clock, and I stood outside it, and I barely knew where I was. I was so in bits after the emotional trauma of talking in my first session. And I next thing was just as I was trying to figure out where to even go, I realised that I could hear a beautiful rendition of Loch Lomond being sung. And that was one of Gordon's favourite songs. And we'd not long been at my eldest daughter's wedding. And of course, in typical Glasgow wedding fashion, we had Loch Lomond. And I can still see, particularly all of us, but particularly my 2 sons, Gordon and Struan, dancing together and with the Loch Lomond. So it meant a lot. And we'd also gone to Loch Lomond only a few weeks previous to that to scatter Gordon's ashes at Loch Lomond in the most beautiful setting, but very, very difficult. You never want to do anything like that. So I walked towards the sound of the singing. It was a kind of like a focus for me. I was like, oh, I'll go and listen to that. So I stood and listened, and I was crying, and then Liam stopped, and I'd gone over and I said, could you play Caledonia, which was Gordon's really, really favourite song, and one that Struan did the most fantastic video montage for, that we used at Gordon's funeral, which still has wonderful, wonderful memories in it. So Liam played Caledonia for me, and could see that I was really, really upset. So I let Liam jump in there.
So Liam, hi, how you doing?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
Great, thanks for joining us. This is fascinating because from your point of view, you're standing busking, which I've done, which is a soulless thing sometimes, and you see this woman breaking her heart. You see Sarah breaking her heart. What happened? How did you feel? What did you do?
I mean, like you said, it's soul destroying sometimes. You're up there, you're just trying to... I think people forget sometimes that a lot of the time we're not doing the busking because we love it, we're out there trying to make money so that we can record and try and do all that stuff. So there are times when you're playing and you're really sort of, you're feeling it. I didn't particularly want to go out that day. I remember it was freezing cold, and it was the furthest thing from what I wanted to do at that point. But there are times where you connect with someone, or you see someone, and they're really appreciating what you do, and you can tell that there's deep meaning behind the song. Sometimes the song that you're singing. I've always been quite empathetic to a point, and I hate to see someone upset, or I like to sort of try and speak to them. I would imagine if that was my mum, or if that was someone, a family member or something, that someone would try and at least make sure they were okay. And I could see Sarah was really upset. So we got talking, we got chatting a bit, and there was I lost some friends to suicide, and I always remember their mother's face. I always remember there was a particular look. It was like it was grief, and I could just tell. She explained about losing Gordon, and she never went into any detail about how or anything like that. Maybe in hindsight, a lot of the time I sometimes will say things and I don't think about what I'm saying. And I was just, I didn't want to press, but I asked. I said, was it suicide by any chance? I said, I know it's none of my business, but I just had a feeling. And then she got speaking about that, and yeah, I remember my friend's mum's face, and it's like a universal thing. I think it's that grief that's just so hard to hide, you know.
There's a Glasgow thing with that as well, though, isn't there? About going over to somebody and just going, because I remember when my mother died.
Oh yeah.
And I didn't know how to process it, and I just wanted a gran hug, and I actually went and sat in Silverburn for a while, where a new old woman sat in the benches, and eventually a wee old woman got talking to me, and I said, "Look, I don't know, my mum's died," and she ended up saying, "Come on back and I'll make you some soup." And I was like, "No, it's fine, it's all right." But I think there is a real kind of, I'm not saying exclusive of Glasgow, but there's a humanity thing where when you see somebody in pain, especially if you've noticed that look that you've seen in other people's faces, that you just want to. The amount of times I've been walking down the street and there's been a busker playing something that's just caught me, and you think that there's something going on that's drawn the two of us together. And so when you got talking, how did you end up working together? Because this is incredible.
So what happened was, every week when I came out of my counselling sessions, I would find Liam playing, and we would have a wee chat, and he'd play a song for me, different songs, but it was always just right what he picked. And so we did feel a connection, which, does seem a bit bizarre, 60-year-old grandmother and a young Glasgow busker, and yet we did have a connection. One of the other things that I had been doing since I lost Gordon, which I'd never done before, was to write poems, and I found it, obviously tapped into my emotions and my grief, and for me it was a way to express it, and it was quite cathartic. And then one night, and I normally wrote them all in the middle of the night, because things are always worse in the middle of the night, and then there was at one point, I think it was just after Caroline Flack had died as well, there was some other sort of quite high profile suicides in the press, and I was just thinking that, like, something has to be done to stop people doing this. It's so prevalent, and it's almost like people are just thinking it's just a choice, that they just decide to take their own life, and we've got to do more to try and stop it, because it just is the way, the waste of the potential they could have, and the devastation it wreaks for everybody else for generations. So I'd written a song which for me expressed what I want people to do. It was called Just Reach Out, and it's saying, that when things are bad, just reach out. It's trying to get across the fact that people are irreplaceable, that the grief that would be left behind is terrible, and if they can reach out and get help, things will get better. So those were the sort of thoughts that I was trying to put into a song. So I'd written that some time ago, and then because I'd got to the stage where I'd been talking to Liam for a few weeks and I felt comfortable with him, so one of the days after my session, I'd I said, have you got a few minutes, Liam, for a chat? And he was like, yeah, of course I do. And I said, well, look, I said, this will probably seem a bit mad to you, and if you think I'm deranged and it's not for you, just say, I said, but I've written this. So I handed over the bit of paper to him, and he read it, and straight away he's like, you want me to do a song, make this into a song? And I said, yeah, I do. And he just wrote the most amazing melody, and we've created a song which we both want to touch people, and hopefully just to make somebody just think, maybe just at that critical, crucial time when they might make an unchangeable decision, when they do something that cannot ever be undone, just to pause and think, I'll reach out, just to realise that they are unique and irreplaceable, to realise the impact it would have, you know, if they took that final step. So Liam did the most amazing job with it.
Right, well, let's have a listen to it. Let's have a look at the video.
When life is hard and gets you down, when pain and doubt will cast you out, when you can't find the words to say that you can't see another day, you are lost but can be found. You are loved and needed here, and we can help you fight your fears. No matter what, there is a way. Oh, I beg you, please just stay. Life is better when you're around. Just reach out and find someone who makes you want to stay. I know that it can't be done. I need you here with me. I can cry 1,000 tears. I just want you to fly, my dear, 'cause it gets better. It gets better.
So can people get a hold of that? Is it for sale?
It is, yes. And anybody that all revenues from the downloads are going to the Samaritans. So 100% of download revenue is to go to the Samaritans, because, you know, we're hoping that this will help people to reach out and get help. So we also need to raise funds. So there's people there to answer the calls.
Awesome. Liam, you said that you've lost a few friends to this, and you know, I'm a kind of grandpa age, and the older you get, the more that happens, and it just seems to be that over the past, well, certainly over the past year, with the circumstances we're in, it seems to be every couple of weeks I'm hearing about somebody that I either know or know of, or a friend of a friend that this has happened to, and it's almost as if it's not being reported or focused on. And it's strange. You keep sort of hearing about it and not really knowing what happened. It's almost like another epidemic that isn't being discussed. Mm-hmm. Do you, as a young guy in your 20s, do you find it easier to talk about than somebody like me that was in the 70s and 80s that went, no, everything's fine, I don't want to talk about this? Is it easier for your generation to discuss this stuff?
I think, I mean, it really depends on your sort of support network, your pals, or all that sort of stuff. I think it depends on your personality as well. I know just through prior experience and having lost friends that it's so important to talk. It's so important to speak, because there's so many people that are such happy people on the outside. I mean, you've heard of comedian Robin Williams or that. Those kind of people, they're very happy people, and nobody sees that side of them. I think musicians as well, to a point. I sing a lot of sad songs, but a lot of musicians that, you know, they come off stage, they're happy. There's always that image that you've got to put across, and the sort of the days where nobody's there and you hear a lot that they're very sort of depressed in their own heads. And I find that for me, I'm very lucky that I've got the support that I do, and I'm able to speak. I think it's different for people your age, you know, or that people my parents' age that are coming up. It's like it's ingrained in you that you keep a stiff upper lip or whatever. You just get through it, and it's not how you deal with problems. It's just putting problems aside, pushing them aside. So I think
That's
for
what
people
I've found.
my age, it is becoming a lot easier.
Yeah, what I've found with my own experience over the past year, and really examining this stuff, because this is the second time I've been through a big journey with all this, because the first time was about 5 years ago. This time I was doing it with a little bit of experience and a bit of previous knowledge and a slight ability to be able to step out and look at what was going on and try and rationalize it. And the thing that frightens me at the moment is there's going to be a lot of people possibly my age that have got that stiff upper lip, that won't want to discuss this, encountering this for the first time, because we're in an almost wartime situation at the moment. And if you've got the seeds of, which I think we've all got the seeds of mental health in us, this will be a new experience for people, and it's so hard. And I've found over the past year that actually talking about it and reaching out, as you say, is actually the best thing to do, because even if somebody else says, I feel like that as well, you go, wow, I'm not a freak. I'm not the only one. And the thing about, I mean, I know so many people that are outwardly, dazzling and fabulous and amazing, and inside I can't be accused of that because I'm a crabbit bastard all the time. So, it's not, but it always seems to be like that. I mean, the thing that struck me about Gordon was that you just looked at Gordon and you thought, he's got the perfect life. Why would anything like this happen? And it just shows you that this is indiscriminatory. Anybody can get like this, and anybody can have this happen to them. It's not if you're a sad person or if you've had bad luck. I know that these things can contribute to it, but anyone can be affected by this, no matter how on the outside your life looks great, or even if your life is genuinely great, your perception of it distorts. And I mean, Sarah, I'd like to finish up by just asking, from a point of view of somebody who's experienced the wake of what's left, what would you say to somebody who's listening to this or watching this, who is perhaps not about to do something, but who has had thoughts and maybe has one of these periods of 3 or 4 days where it's preoccupying them? What would you say as a mum or as a family member to them? What should they do?
They definitely should speak to somebody, and probably to speak to somebody that's not connected to them, like one of the agencies like Samaritans, or to phone the doctor, or to to get help. Because if they're struggling with things that they don't want to talk to their family or friends about, then they have to find somebody that's not connected to them to do that. And like in the words in the song I wrote is, just my plea to people to know that the devastate, they are irreplaceable. There would be the grief that it leaves behind for the people who loved you is terrible. Gordon's funeral, there was 600 people in the church. There was 200 people standing outside. And every one of these people was really upset and would have done anything to help him if he'd reached out to them. And, for the family, we are never going to be the same again. To me, it's very important to try and find all the moments of joy that I can every single day, to focus on the positives, to try and make a contribution by helping other people. But, I won't be the same again. The rest of my family won't be the same again. Gordon was unique and irreplaceable. will always be part of our family. So don't listen to a lie in your head that says you're a burden or you don't matter or nobody will care or people will be better off, because that's just not true. Actually, people will be completely and utterly devastated. I'm on a sort of self-help support forum for people who've been bereaved by suicide, and sometimes I can't go into it because the sheer outpouring of pain every day from people who have been newly bereaved by suicide, and particularly I go to the one part of the forum that's for parents. It's unbearable to see the amount of pain, and again, it's something that is why I want to talk and I want to try and do whatever I can in a small way to help, because it's just awful to see the thousands of people that are being affected by the pain and grief and guilt of somebody close to them dying from suicide. It's just awful. So, I do think we need to talk about it more.
Thank you so much for doing this. I mean, you must have people saying this to you all the time, that I can't imagine how it must feel, and for you to do this kind of work, if more people did this, it would get people talking and it would get people connecting and getting help, and what you've done with this song's incredible, and just it's so sore to talk about this, isn't it? It's so sore from a point of view of somebody who has skirted the edges of it. I can't fathom what it must be like to have actually dealt with it. So I just think, I think people like you, Sarah, are incredible, and I'd really, really want to thank you for coming on here today and being so honest with us. And as you said, if one person hears this and it changes their mind, man, that's invaluable. So guys, thank you both for joining me on Swim for Land, and I wish you all the best.
When life is hard and gets you down, when pain and doubt will cast you out, when you can't find the words to say that you can't see another day, you are lost but can be found. You are loved and needed here, and we can help you fight your fears. No matter what, there is a way. Oh, I beg you, please just stay. Life is better when you're around. Just reach out and find someone who makes you want to stay. I know that it can't be done. I need you here with me. I can cry 1,000 tears. I just want you to fly, my dear, 'cause it gets better. It gets better. I know that it gets better. I know that it gets better. You fill a space no other can. Don't take your life, please understand. You leave a hole no tears can fill. I love you now and always will. Life is better when you're around. find someone who'll make you want to stay. I know that it can't be done. I need you here with me. I can cry 1,000 tears. I just want you to fly, my dear, 'cause it gets better. It gets better. I know that it gets better. I know that it gets better. Oh, oh. I know that it gets better. Just reach out and find someone who makes you want to stay. I know that it can't be done. I need you here with me. And bit by bit the weight will lift. The storm will pass and the weight will shift. 'Cause it gets better. It gets better. I know that 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 it gets better.